Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming on to the industry call for manufacturing we're going to be talking about today. And the format today is using panelists, so I'm pretty excited to be here with Kim. This is our third industry webinar for today. What a wonderful idea of EOS to roll this out in APAC. I got to say, it's been a sensational learning experience, hasn't it, Kim?
Absolutely. Talking to entrepreneurs all over the world, the details might be different color, but the problems we all face are the same.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I've actually, I was just counting in between the calls. I've got 38 new learnings just to apply in my business, and I'm in a technology business, and we haven't even spoken about that industry yet. So I'm pretty excited about applying some of these, some really cool and really easy implementable ideas and real actions. I've got my team meeting after this. I'm all pumped for that as well. So it's been a great value for myself. And Kim, I'm sure you've learnt lots as well.
Absolutely. Just these beautiful one-liners. I think my favorite was what Rod said last time. Great leadership is just as infectious as the virus.
Oh, that
Love
was
that
great.
line.
Yeah, I got that too. And I circled my favorite is talking to customers and suppliers and people that I don't normally talk to. That's been my favorite takeaway and a nice kick in the butt to make sure I keep doing that. So today what we're going to do is in this session we're focused on manufacturing. Now, manufacturing is the root of all products. So it's a most important part of our industry when it comes to business. Today we've got two wonderful panelists on here representing two different regions from Indonesia and from China South, which is from Hong Kong. We've got Herbert, and then we've got Lanny from Indonesia East, who's going to be talking about, they're both going to be talking about their businesses. Today it's a very casual style. We'll hear from both of them about what's going on in their world, what sort of businesses they're in, and we'll get to understand them. And just so you know, while you're listening, jump into the chat anytime and put a question there. And we're going to have plenty of time at the end and during it to answer those questions with these great panelists. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Herbert. You're based in Hong Kong. You're in the China South chapter. So Herbert, tell us a bit about your business and tell us about what's been going on in your world for the last, let's say, 3 or 4 months. Thanks, Herbert.
Sure. So thank you to the EO panelists and thank you to everybody who joined the call today. My name is Herbert Lun. I'm Managing Director of Wingsang Bakelite Electrical Manufacturing. And we're a designer manufacturer of electrical hairstyling appliances based in Hong Kong with a factory in Shenzhen. We have about 600 staff in both locations combined. And we specialize in beauty and hairstyling products sold through either salon-only distribution channels or through premium prestige beauty retailers in Japan, US, Europe, and Australia. Our company's family-owned. I run it along with two of my siblings, Ivan and Jenny. Ivan Lun happens to be a member of EO in the Hong Kong chapter. And we do about 20 million in revenue every year, depending on the up year or the down year. And it looks like this year is going to be a down year. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. How's it been for the last 3 to 4 months? It's been challenging. I would call it a cycle of emotions. We started out with fear and some frustration when the outbreak first happened. And as a residual of a lot of what happened in 2019 as well, between the US and China trade hostilities, as well as some of the civil unrests in Hong Kong. So definitely started out the year with fear and frustration. Moving on to just concerned about our team members, concerned about our clients, and focusing our energy on trying to bounce back from the initial round of shutdown during Chinese New Year. And then, when things started to pick up steam, when China looks like it has the outbreak under control and we're gearing up for production, the outbreak started spreading in Europe and the rest of the world. And, the whole cycle repeats itself. And we're kind of trapped in between cycles right now, especially since a lot of our manufacturing, not just myself, but a lot of people who are in manufacturing and at the export business in China, they're kind of in holding pattern, waiting to see what's going on, waiting to find out how long this is going to take before the rest of the world can get a handle of the outbreak. And that's kind of what where I find myself. You know, I was just talking a little bit with Carlo and Kim earlier before the call started. This feels a lot like a Groundhog Day. Every day is just going through the same cycles over and over again. So that's where we are.
Lenny, do you mind sharing with us your story?
My story, my name is Lenny. I'm from EO Indonesia. I'm running a footwear manufacturer. Okay. So our market is actually the traditional market for Indonesia. It's not modern market, which is like our impact is quite huge in these matters. So my company is actually, we are a group of footwear. We are producing like about few millions, like 30 million pairs a year. Okay. And then with about 6,000 workers with the 4 different factories. So it's a huge impact because like there's no certainty like how long it's gonna last, okay, and then what we should do at the first. So when the first happened in the early stage of the early of the March, okay, the sales actually increasing for the upcoming Lebaran or Indonesia Muslim festivals, okay. We are very happy for that. So when the outbreak came, the fact our people still celebrating for the sales increase, it's not really. But when it start getting serious in Indonesia, then we still running. We don't plan to close down. We still running with the precautions. We provide all the workers with the disinfectant and the thermometers and those etc. for the early stage, okay. But coming for the mid-March, it's developing really quickly when the sales starting dropping down, okay, and then there's disruption that becomes like people like stay at home, you know, and suppliers start saying that, you know, we work from home, it's going to be delivery, like more problems and blah, blah, blah. So that's where we really see the effect, okay, and then it's really going fast. Actually, during the first March, beginning of March, I was still overseas. Okay, I was like traveling, doing a road trip in London, in UK, you know. So people was every day coming home, you know, what can I do when I come home? You know, you guys really know what you should do. Just like the sales really great, you know, just do all the precautions like what the government said. Okay, like blah, blah, blah. So initial sets was like that. I was still like traveling. I came back like, I don't know, the third week of March. Okay, everybody's starting like when London got really, really bad. And everybody was like, are you sure? Like, are you going to be okay in London? Like with the safety, etc. So what I did during the travel, I also walk from the road instead. So when I came back, the sale actually stopped dropping. Okay, so then when I decided to assemble all my team, I was working from home, still working from home. Okay, so I'll do self-isolation, lockdown, and then it was previously only the like a level 1, level 2 organization, our managers, that we do the Zoom meeting regularly. But now when the first thing I came back is like to ask them to do Zoom training for the whole staff, including the lower level for the like the supervisor whatsoever, okay, because to prepare them to work from home. So what I did, that's the first strategy I did. Like everybody knows how to be in touch, and then we starting make a stress test. You know, like what is the best, what is the worst scenario, how long it can last. Okay, then if it if it's going on until like a June, or until August or until September, we have to make all the scenario of the worst case scenarios, okay? So we come up with a few plans, plan A, B, and C, okay? And then when things getting really worse, I said, okay, you know what? Now it's like we set up all the war rooms, okay, the departments set the war rooms, and then I'm starting having like about 8 hours meeting a day, okay, like a Zoom meeting with all the departments, okay, to plan. So there are a lot of factors that we have to stack out, like the supply chain issue, the payment, the bank, and the employee. Like we have to, the cash flow is the most important. Okay, let's say if I have to close down for the 6 months, okay, that what is our strategy for the factors. Okay, so that's what we are trying to do.
And just for the audience here, every panelist we've talked to have shared with us different timeframes of how much this crisis has impacted them. Yvonne Cam from the last panel said that she's been in this process for nearly a year now. So if for a bit of perspective for our audience, can you both share how long you have been in this crisis or process? Herbert, we'll start with you, and then Lenny will come to you.
So for us, it started early last year when, the beginning of 2019, when the US started ratcheting up trade tariffs on imports from China. Now, our product category wasn't specifically added to the tariff list, but the threat of that tariff was constant. And a lot of our customers in the US market were pushing back on us to try and find tariff relief, either through some kind of rebate or discount on the import tariffs when they do come into effect, or they were squeezing us on exchange rate. And at the next stage, they were pushing us to diversify our supply base from China to help them mitigate that concern. So that's been going on for a whole year. That dominated the conversation. The social unrest in Hong Kong didn't really affect us as much because we were mainly an exporter. But it did reduce the number of clients that were willing to fly into Hong Kong and do business. So we're more reliant on Zoom. We're more reliant on our team flying over to meet with them. But those were at least manageable. And then when the coronavirus hit, the biggest change was nobody knew what's going to happen in the next month or two. And I think that certainly was where we were during the entire month of February, when everything, Lenny talked about, we were going through on a daily basis, talking to our team, trying to get back up to speed. And, with the added uncertainty that, we don't know if clients are going to be placing orders when they don't know what their delivery dates are. So we were trying to navigate through a lot of uncertainty and trying to risk manage and trying to balance expectations on both ends. And then when the virus became fully uncontained and spread to the rest of the world, now we're at that same spot when we're struggling with cash flow, struggling with figuring out what to do from 3 months, 6 months, and a year time frame, figuring out what our worst case scenarios and what our corresponding response is going to be. So it's been a continuous loop of uncertainty, and it's really hard in this environment to really focus on the positive as much as we want to. We keep trying to have to shift our focus on how to find positives out of this.
Thank you, Herbert. Lani, we'll jump over to you.
For Indonesia, actually, the sign of recession has been, we have seen the sign of recession since last year. Okay, the demand has been dropping down. End of the last year, our strategy is actually how to make strategy facing this recession in the market, like for this year, without seeing the coronavirus. But what I've seen now, that actually coronavirus has changed the game. Okay, totally changed the game. So for what I'm seeing right now, that's the effect right now. It's going to be a new normal that we have to change the whole strategy for the whole year. But for my company itself, because our demand and supply, actually our demand is more higher than our supply, so it's a quite advantageous of us. Okay, but not the general. So actually, early of this year, I've just adding more production line. Okay, like a machinery to increase the production. But again, the coronavirus changed again.
Thank you, Lane. That was really interesting. So when you think about manufacturing, the most interesting thing around it is, you guys need raw materials. You have to get raw materials. You then put all that raw materials together and make a consumer-based product. And then that gets, I'm guessing you guys go vertical and you will supply it maybe to a wholesaler, a distributor, and then they go to retail. It'd be really interesting to understand how that supply chain has been affected and how you're coping with that supply chain challenge. Herbert.
So I can roll our timeline back to before Chinese New Year, before, at that time, but things were still relatively normal, at least from a supply chain perspective. And of course, as you all know, China's government imposed an extended Chinese New Year holiday break to try and control the virus. And as a result of that, the entire supply chain, not just for our own category, which is electrical appliances, but for pretty much everything across the board, from paper products to electronics to printed to plastics, everything was affected in some degree because in our case, the Chinese government allowed factories to reopen on February 10th. But the reality is it depends on which municipality you operate in. There is a staggered rollback. And so for us, we didn't actually get back on operation for another week and a half. And at first, there was a lot of frustration because there were bureaucratic requirements that we have to have a certain number of masks and certain types of sanitizing equipment, and we have to have procedure in place to ensure that workers who come back are coming back and working in a safe environment. And all these are very important. But there was a lot of confusion as to what those policies are, and they kept changing the goals. So for the first week and a half, it was just frustration across the board. Once we finally got back into operation, then we started calling our suppliers and say, okay, so you guys have been coming back now. How are you able to supply us? And there were widespread shortages and undercapacity utilization because everybody had only a fraction of their workers coming back. Most people have some kind of a similar kind of restriction on how they can operate, either by reducing capacity, spreading everybody out on the assembly line, or they were simply struggling to get raw material because there was no transportation. And so it really took about another 3 to 4 weeks before all of that started shaking out for workers to start getting back into these factories and to start pumping out products. And from a timeline standpoint, that took us right around to the first week of March, when we felt confident enough to tell our clients that, okay, anything that you want to purchase, anything that you want us to ship, we'll be able to give you a pretty solid lead time. Then the rest of the world's outbreak happened, and that changed the dynamic. All of a sudden, there is we started seeing our supply base shutting down in anticipation of a crunch. And so it really is component specific. We went from having suppliers telling us we can't ship anything until June to all of a sudden they've got this spare capacity that they're saying, if you don't want us to ship anything, we're going to shut our factory down. And that swing happened from one extreme to another, probably in about three weeks.
Lanny, let's hear from you about your supply chain, the vertical markets, and how have you been coping and managing all of the supply chain?
For us, we have a few factory with a different kind of product, from shoes up to sandals. Okay, for the shoes itself, when the first outbreak happened in China, okay, the first thing we did, calculating how many of our stocks actually enough, okay, until China ready for supplying. So at that time, we calculate in January, around in February, we can calculate up to June. Okay, our stock gonna enough until June, which is it's safe enough. And then for the other factory that we have, actually we also have Indonesia. We are a group, so we do produce our own raw materials. Okay, so we don't really have a problem with the raw materials because we're producing in Indonesia.
When you say you produce your own raw materials, what do you mean by that? What sort of raw materials?
We are actually produce a lot. Okay, all the raw materials for the making a sandals. Let's say we are producing the APA. We are producing all the tongs from the PVC. We have the PVC factory. We have the rubber, a rubber material factory for the EVA. We have the printing factory, our own printing factory. Okay, there's a lot. It's a group of the factories that we have to support the whole company's need and supply.
I guess when you're in control of that supply chain, it makes it a lot easier. What about the other way? When you're selling the product, how do you struggle with getting it out of the factory to the consumer? How do you do that?
80% of our product actually supply for our own manufacturer. Okay, so we don't really affected by that. Okay, because learning from the what the crisis in '98. Okay, which is similar at the time, the dollars was increased a lot. Okay, and then at that time our strategy, because the sales dropped, the production dropped until 30% in the '98. Okay, because of the dollars. So what we did at the time, we make a strategy that I start exporting for the Europe, and then for the Europe, and then for the US, and then I got a lot of order which can actually cover for the 70% of production. At that time, we can survive because we have our own chain of the supply chain of the raw materials, which is our competitors like couldn't supply because they have a lot of the they really depend on the small other factories or from the China supplies. Okay, so that's really advantageous for us right now.
Thank you. We just had a quick question from the audience asking Lani what products you supply. We just clarified it's footwear. For anyone in the audience right now, if you have any questions for our panelists, pop them in the Q&A box or the chat and we'll answer them live. Now, before Herbert, you mentioned this concept of Groundhog Day, and you mentioned this concept of uncertainty and operating in uncertainty. The question I have for both our panelists today, and we'll start with you, Herbert, and then to you, Lani. How do you prepare yourself and your businesses and your teams to operate in uncertainty when you don't know really when this will end?
That is a really good question. And if I would be lying if I pretend I have all the answers, but I will definitely share some of the emotional roller coaster that I've been on as, you know, myself and my team are trying to navigate through this. So, I mean, everything that I say kind of happens in two waves, because obviously there is the wave of outbreak in China, and then now there's the rest of the world. I will talk, on this particular case, I will talk more about, you know, the rest of the world, because that particular uncertainty is still grappling. It's something that we're trying to deal with daily. It really is a case of just trying to communicate with both our team and our clients overseas, and we're spending a lot of time on Zoom calls, just understanding how they're feeling. At this point, there's not even any point in asking what forecast they can provide, because right now nobody can provide forecasts. You know, a majority of our products are sold in channels like Ulta and Sephora, and they're shut down across, you know, US and Europe. There's no sales going through. So asking these questions will just, you know, get us aggravated, and, you know, we're not going to get answers. But we, you know, it's kind of, we're resigned to the fact that we're not going to have data to work on this. So instead of that, you know, what can we do to help our customer overcome this? And, you know, when we talk to them, we discovered that it's not just a business decision for them. It's also immensely personal. You know, we're talking either to mid-level purchasing managers or project managers who are genuinely concerned that they're going to be out of a job in a couple of months because they don't see how this is sustainable, to company owners, you know, small to medium independent companies that are worried about their cash flow. They're worried about where the next payroll money is going to come from. And they're more worried about that than, you know, my continuous pestering question to them about, you know, what kind of order forecast? How long do you think this is going to last? And one thing I definitely discovered is once I started opening up and talking to them and asking them how they're feeling, they are very willing and open to share their feelings as well. And so it's just trying to focus on beyond the business metrics and trying to build relationship with them in the hopes that one day, you know, when these things, when the outbreak is over and things are slowly getting back to normal, they remember that, you know, hey, we're not just about the business side of things. We're also trying to build relations with them and, you know, trying to build a partnership with them. And I think that's been my biggest takeaway through this entire period as we're trying to manage uncertainty.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Herbert. Lani, over to you.
Sorry. So for the strategy that we make in the companies, there's a lot of things that the uncertainty. We're actually making a lot of scenarios. Okay, like the first thing I do is like I tell my staff like to be positive, and then to really see the fact here. So we have a level up to 4 levels in the companies. Okay, that we do have to Zoom. I tell them actually the fact of the condition right now, it's not gonna getting better until June. So forget about that it's gonna over between 2 weeks. Okay, so let's get to the fact. So let's start with the best case scenario, which is the company gonna run again in July. Okay, that's our best case scenario. And then if it's getting worse, let's say after, because Indonesia, we have those Lebaran period, if government cannot prevent them of going back to that hometown, means the outbreak gonna last longer until September. So that's gonna be our worst case scenario, okay, or even until next year, end of the year. So I'm just working for the first with them. Let's say how do we pass this for the best case scenario first in July, okay? So we did the stress test a lot, like what is the effect, because the most important of company is actually about the cash flow, okay? Because we're gonna have a very hard disturbance in about collecting the money, okay? All the customers starting close down with the lockdown, okay? Means that the account receivable gonna be very hard and blah blah blah. So when I did that, so we did the stress test on the cash flow. The first thing we did about, I think mid of March, we lay off of the people, of the contract people. Okay, so we lay off the contract people and we keep just the permanent worker, and then until that we do it step by step. So basically, I told my companies it's also very dangerous to keep them also working, because we have few thousands workers are working. If one of them got, let's say, touch wood, about positive, it's gonna affect really bad for the image of the company as well. So we already start planning for the closing down. So basically by this week today is our last day production. Okay, so the company is closing down by next week. So we go back. If we are closing down, what are the effect of all the things? Okay, so we still working from home, means that there are stores, our customers still opening. So we still, of course, running the account receivable. We try to cut the fixed cost as much as possible. We renegotiate restructuring with the bank. Okay, so we do everything we can, and then we talk to the suppliers as well. So we did a lot to make sure that our cash flow, the first thing, has to survive until end of the year. So that's the first priority that we do. Okay, besides that, there's no such thing as a win-win right now. It's just how to survive from this, not to get the bad to worse situation. So that's how we are trying to do.
Thank you. That's really great. It's really great. And to do a lot of what both of you are talking about, and I mentioned it earlier before we started, but the concept of this supply and demand, I mean, in Australia, we're seeing this big challenge where ships are arriving full of containers and they're ready to drop them off and get them onto trucks and get them out to retail stores, into warehouses, and get them ready for distribution. But our country closed for business, and many countries are closed for business. They're not taking stock. So when I think about it, and I was reading about this and researching it, that in manufacturing, a lot of manufacturings are what we call stockpiling all their good sellers. They're making sure they've got stock ready for the demand to kick in, ready to ship quickly. And that's something that manufacturers are doing right now to keep their staff employed, their machines running, and then they can, how do they say, lower the curve, I guess, around their manufacturing to get ready for when that demand kicks back in. What are your thoughts on that methodology for manufacturers that's what they could be doing now? Herb?
To a certain extent, we are doing a limited scale of flattening the curve for the long run. I'll explain by saying that we are predominantly made to order. So we stockpile some basic components and raw material, but the majority, and certainly critical and specific components for any given product, we would only order from our supplier when we have either a solid forecast or an order in place. And with the uncertainty right now, we are both trying to downscale our current production capability. So we are, cutting back on staffing levels. We're cutting back on work hours to try and prolong this for as much as possible. We're keeping an eye on our overhead expenditures, trying to maintain cash flow for as long as possible. But here's the dilemma. We're both trying to confront a short-term problem and a long-term viability problem. And we have ongoing new product development projects that are currently in place that clients are still expecting to execute, because these are projects that we will ultimately deliver and ship in either 4 to 8 months time frame. And so we do need to maintain that operation. And so everything on the production side is about just dragging it out for as much as possible. But I can tell you, the picture is grim. A lot of our forecast partners are coming back and say all the retail channels that they have reached out to and all of the online sales that they're reaching out to, have basically zeroed out the forecast for anything after June. And we're talking about products that are going into the beauty category. It's definitely not essential at this time. And so that's the challenge we face. How do we balance the world's needs right now, which is heavily based on containing the outbreak, sustaining everybody during their self-imposed isolation and quarantine, versus going about with products that are just business as usual. And right now, we're definitely looking at a prolonged period of underproduction, to the point where we, in a month's time, we may have to seriously consider letting go the majority of our workers, or even some of our fixed overhead staff, because we need to figure out a way to ride this out. And our reaction and our plans largely are contingent on how is this going to come back. If the US shuts down for another month, what's that situation going to look like? If it shuts down for 3 months and there's still no end in sight, how is that going to look like? And so, we kind of go through these worst case scenario analysis, and that worst case scenario keeps changing every week. And it's definitely a challenge. Right now, from a demand standpoint, there is no demand. That's as simple as that.
Thank you. Lani, what are your thoughts?
So my company, actually, we also have our own distribution company. Okay, so we have a wholesaler distribution in several locations in Indonesia. Okay, so what I did, actually, I combined the distribution company and the factory together, sitting together. Okay, and I said to the factory, how much order have you received from our sister company? And they said, actually, the factory already have about 2 months order, full 2 months order for the sister company. So I sit down to all of them. I said, okay, let's list down all the merchandising analysis. Okay, we're gonna do a very heavy international merchandising analysis, and I cut down all the orders. Okay, so I said we do because we have a star grade systems, okay, for the best sellers and those kind of stuff and the slow moving product, and then just introducing a new models. Okay, so because I said it's gonna be changing now because Lebaran is not gonna coming. Okay, so let's change everything. So I cut down that order about 30% for the factory. So I said, okay, guys, we have to shut down the factory sooner or later with this kind of situations. Okay, so you guys just stock up. Okay, for the most essential parts, for distribution, for our only the top best-selling products. We are not gonna introduce a new product even though it's already big order. Okay, cancel all the order because this is not gonna last for it's gonna last for long term. But at that time, there's an argument we already received the order from the customers. Okay, the customers still demand the product to be supplied. I said, when are you gonna supply it? They said about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I said, you know what, guys? 4 weeks, forget it. Now what we have to do, stock up, pile up, put all the distribution companies, they have enough stock for at least for the 2 month sales. And that's all I need. Okay, why? Because when we have to place order back to the factory need time to rerun. So we give the instruction, okay, you have to stock up all the, let's say you have to stock up the, raw materials. Okay, just enough for at least for the 2 weeks production, because we're gonna have a very, very hard to sourcing the product when we decide to start production. So we make the curve. We make actually our company with the stress test. We make the curve when the coronavirus peak and when the coronavirus going down. When will our customers will start selling? When will our customers will closing down the stores? Actually, we come up our customers because they are traditional market, which is they are not really well informed. Okay, so we expect them actually to close the last and open the first. Okay, so that's really happening right now. Even now with the current condition, not really good. And then what happened since last week? The government starting lockdown for our regional lockdown. Okay. And that's when all the customers start saying, oh, you know what, we have no customers, and then distribution is getting a lot harder and those kind of stuff. Okay, so what we are doing now, that our strategy said, so in that case, we have enough stocks now. When they open, the distribution can run. So that's when I said, the factory now, you all have to close down before getting worse for the things. Yeah.
Thank you, Lani. Now, this is a question for both Herbert and Lani, and this comes from Richard Tier. If you're in a product that's not an essential product, have you pivoted? The question really here is, given everything that's happening, have you had to pivot what you offer and how you offer it, or how you work with your supply chain?
Sorry, repeat again, Kim. I'm not really clear.
If your product is not an essential product, have you pivoted?
Have you what?
Pivoted means to change strategy or to drastically change something or tweak something to offer something different. Perhaps if we start with Herbert to give for a bit of context, and then we can come back to you, Lani.
So on pivot, it's something that we have been trying to do since the beginning of the US-China trade war, because it is a matter of just diversifying our product base. Right now, we're very heavily focused in the beauty sector. We are also kind of somewhat overexposed to the US market. And so that's something that we've always wanted to do. And the coronavirus outbreak really just accelerated and emphasized that need. So starting last year, we started a project that took us away from the traditional beauty sector and started developing products based on our core competence of thermoelectric control systems. And so we're applying that skill set, the same skill set that we use for, trying to come up with high-end straightening and curling irons, and taking that core technology and applying it to different products and working with customers that are delivering products that are a different category altogether, and B, somewhat more recession proof. And so it is fortunate that we are, we have these opportunities, but this is a long-term project, and we don't see us getting any production out of that for another 7 to 8 months at the moment. So that pivot is happening. We also considered the possibility of using our existing manufacturing facility to jump into manufacturing for more critical commodity products, such as thermometers, infrared thermometers, or mask production. And we are actually seeing a great rush of investment going into these product categories. We know of at least more than a handful of friends who have gone into mask manufacturing, investing in a assembly line that can make a surgical mask is actually not crazy expensive. And if you have the team that's ready and willing to jump into it, it seems like a good business now. But I think by the time we wanted to pull that trigger, I think we've seen a lot of people piling in as well. And could there be a glut at the end and nobody seeing any return on it? So we're a little bit more cautious. We're trying to focus on pivoting into categories and products that are still within our core competence, that are still viable, even in a economic downturn, and just staying the course and just letting it play out. That's not much of a pivot, but it is a big shift away from our current focus of just making hair curling irons and straighteners.
Thank you, Herbert. Over to you, Lani.
For me, what we try to do is actually, because there is very high demand of the medical supplies right now, okay? Basically starting from I'm trying to help for the government here, for the supply in the hospitals, for the APD, okay? So I'm asking my team to start looking at our actually raw materials that we have right now, whether the R&D can come up with the items that we can help the governments, which is suddenly actually quite funny, because we can suddenly make a face shield. Okay, we can make a face shield, and then they come up with the production. I say, okay, let's check how many people we need, okay, to work on that, and then how many of the product that we have for the ready stocks materials, and they come up, actually we are ready for the few hundred thousand pieces, okay, that they can do it within 2 weeks, all done, only with 25 people, because we have all the machineries, okay. So I said, in that cash. You know what? The first priority is to help the governments, okay? But there is also very high demand in the market. We can take this chance also to sell a retail price for that, for the first of the first version. So they are working on it right now. Actually, they already start producing, and then next week is already start in the market. So they do that for the face shield, and they come out also with the like what you call, for the mask, for the like a non-medical mask, which is like a quite safe enough, okay, with the already there. They even make a mold for that. They're coming out with the like an N95, okay, like easier to wear, this kind of stuff. And they come to me, do we want to produce this? Because 80% of the material we have it. Okay, we just need to buy a few other materials. And then because we also like a lot of other things that come up, but I told them, you know what, guys, just focus on for the face shield first for right now, because the mask itself, I rather to supply for the like importing from China for the medical supplies, because the doctors need more. Okay, so we focus, because my main concern as well is like if the company is starting like producing for the big mass production, that means that we have to come in, a lot of staff have to work. Means that we have to risk a lot more people.
Wonderful, thank you, Lani. Now, Herbert and Lani, you're inspiring a lot of questions from the audience today. A lot of these questions are focused around people and staff and employees. So I'm going to combine two of them. The first one is from Rajiv Jalabalan, and he asks, what are you doing as a business to protect your employees from this crisis? And then on the flip side, from Duncan Chow, have you downsized or have you stood people down? Why don't we start with yourself first, Herbert, and then we'll jump over to Lani.
Okay. We have not had any significant cut down in staffing. We did slow down hiring to the point where we actually stopped a few weeks ago. And we've also, because of the quarantine restrictions in China, varied from province to province, we actually told a lot of our staff who can't make it back in time to not rush things, because their safety has to come first. So we did have that staggering comeback, and we never really had any point felt like we need to just let everybody go. And that is still not our preferred option. In China, we also have the additional complication of the China labor laws are fairly clear on this. And at the beginning of the outbreak, the government reiterated that the security of workers' employment is paramount. So they would allow a lot of factories to defer payment on loans, on rent, on even the share of the wages that we have to pay for government social security schemes. But workers' wages cannot be postponed or delayed. That's the government is willing to bend a lot of rules to help factories, but we cannot we cannot survive on the backs of our workers. And I think their position is fairly clear and understandable. And so we in terms of ongoing cutbacks, we have to tread very carefully between what is legal, what is responsible to the company, and what is responsible to our workers and their families. And trying to find that balance, it requires a lot of planning and dedication. And it's not just something that we can go in with a buzzsaw and say, okay, everybody go home, you're out of a job. That definitely won't work in China. And I don't think that's the right thing to do either. We have to balance all three parties in this.
Thank you, Herbert. Over to you, Lani.
For my company, actually, for them right now, for all employees, they can still get the full salary. They're already very, very grateful enough right now. Yeah, right. So instead, like now Lebaran is coming, usually we have a THR, means the yearly bonus they given to them. But we told them, like, let's see the situation for the yearly bonus. We might not be paying on time because we have to focus on the main issue of the cash flow itself. Okay, so we cannot promise a lot of things, but we will say that it will talk later on, which we try to pay it after all this crisis done. Then we can see the continue after the plan D later on if the worst case scenario getting worse. Okay, the best case scenario getting worse. But for the downsizing, we already downsizing like about 700 people. Okay, in the March itself, when the outbreak starting getting worse here, when we decide to cut down the size of production, that's when we said we cut down about 700 people, which is like about all the daily workers. Okay, 700 from my company. I think in total we cut down like about 2,000 people for the daily workers, and then we still keep the remaining. Okay, we can't do much in helping them, but what we did actually, we list down all the staff that already have the, I mean the what you call again, the sickness, like they have diabetic, they have cancer, they have blah blah blah. So we asked them the first thing, like early of March, we asked everybody to come up and then list with us. Okay, those the one that we have the sickness. Okay, they have to report to us, and those are the first person that we actually ask them to stay at home and we pay the salary. Okay, so they cannot come to the factory anymore. Yeah.
So I've got, and we've got about 15 minutes left. We need to just to handle some more questions. I just wanted to summarize a couple of questions I saw about the financial side of stuff. If you look at coronavirus and all the effects it's having on our society, but look at the effect it's having on the currency situation. I mean, it is devastating on the US dollar. And when you think about the local banks and your governments, I'd really like to get some insight into what's happening from the perspective of how the US dollar is affecting the banking, how they're supporting you or not. Maybe Lainey, you can go first this time. Can you give us a quick share around how the US dollar and the banks and financial institutions are supporting or not supporting?
For the dollars itself, frankly speaking, it's not really affect with us. As I said, that we produce almost of our materials from ourselves, so it's basically the rupiah based. And then from for all the institutions, the financial institution that we are working together with, the bank, etc., they are really understanding about this issue. We already like arrest them for us to survive. This is our strategy. Okay, this is our cash flow. This is what we need from you. This is what we need help. And then so far, I can say like about 80% of them give a green light. Okay, to supporting us, because of so far we have a good credit term with them. So to survive this crisis, we really have to have a very good connection with the bank for them to support for us. I think that's one of the key as well in surviving this disaster. Thank you.
Over to you, Herbert.
Okay, we are in a fairly fortunate situation in that Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar. So in terms of a significant portion of our cost, that US currency fluctuation is somewhat balanced out by that. And on the net effect of the RMB's fluctuation against the US dollar is still mostly positive. Banks are definitely worried. They are, our bankers are calling more often than they ever have. And they're questioning, hey, how's your forecast? How is your business projection looking? And I think they are in a position to help. And I echo Lenny's point about having a good relationship with your bank, because you can't really get additional credit line in times like these. It's heavily reliant on your past relationship with them to extend anything that you can get out of the bank. So we fortunately we're in a decent position to leverage their help in this period. The Hong Kong government and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority are also working to try and come up with measures that will help businesses here in Hong Kong. And I hope those policies are going to be helpful. They have arranged government-backed credit lines that banks can use to provide additional liquidity to the businesses that need them. And, for certain, we're going to need a lot of liquidity in the next 6 months till the end of the year. China banking is a little bit more aggressive in terms of providing help to companies. They are predominantly state-driven mandates, whether it's loans or subsidies, export credit insurance subsidies, forgiveness of rent. The scale is bigger than just relying on banking and financial. They're using all the levers that they can pull to try and keep company as stable and solvent as possible. So we're in Hong Kong, that's definitely a help, but I think the scale of the problem is still getting bigger as we speak, and don't know if these are going to be enough if we don't try to come up with a plan to mitigate those and limit those damages in the next 6 months.
Fantastic. Thank you, Herbert. Lani, you wanted to add a bit more to this?
Yes, so actually the banks, when it happened, the bank contacted us quite frequently on the like a weekly basis to ask like how's the situation with us. Okay, we always give the bank for the realistic like how much of our sales going down, and updating the bank with the strategy, because I always take the bank as our partners. Okay, so they being always updated with our business, even they didn't ask. I always give information. So what happened? The bank itself like they make a group. WhatsApp group with us, okay, which is inside there's analysts and blah blah blah, and then we really work together with the bank closely, like giving all our scenarios to the bank, because we did the stress test, okay, like how it affect with the payment, blah blah blah, with the cash flow system, that why we need the money, okay, how much of our receivable we have, and then if it's happened like until July or August or September, blah blah blah. We don't ask the bank's money now, okay, but what we ask from them is like I need your money when I need your money. Something like that. So we start making all those scenario with them. So they already like a being tip or being known like since now. Before things get really worse, that you started. Okay, so that's what I want to give more information on.
Thank you so much for that extra share. Very helpful. So as we are all part of the same organization, EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, it's really important that we talk about it as in how is it supporting you guys? You know, your forums, your chapter. I'd love to hear some stories about what's happening. Have you converted your forum to a virtual forum, for example, or what's happening? Herbert, maybe you go first this time.
So our forum's been have gone virtual since the beginning of February, and because the outbreak happened in such a way that my forum's in Shenzhen, but we have 2 members from Hong Kong and 1 person from Taiwan. So we're a little bit all over the place in the beginning of the year, and we've gone virtual ever since.
Correct.
And it's definitely helpful to have a forum that you can share your biggest fear about how to navigate through this. You know, especially a few of our forum members are based in Shenzhen, and they are right in the middle of that lockdown. And hearing that perspective from them is really insightful for navigating how do we reopen the factory. And as the world is in a lockdown, you know, we're sharing stories about how the disruption is hurting our business and what we're doing. And that moral support is been very important for me.
Absolutely. And how long are the forums going for, and how often are you having them?
We have our monthly forum meeting. We still have our monthly forum meeting. And beyond that, we have our chat group in WeChat. And we're sharing just basic daily thoughts in there on a daily basis.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's great. Lani, what about your forum? Tell us a little bit. Has anything changed there?
Yeah, my forum, we do have a virtual, like a Zoom meeting as well, like a still going on as planned, a monthly forum meeting. And the presentation is like about to present how's the current situation, our strategy, we share strategy, okay, and then how to help each other. So it's been really grateful. We even can have now, since everybody at home, we can have now a social drinking Zoom. So we can have a social drinking night, which is really nice, you know. And then for the chapter itself, I feel like very supported in our chapters, like all the members from Indonesia we all work together. We are in this together, okay? It's like because Indonesia, most of our members are manufacturer, okay? They're actually manufacturing for the disinfectant. They have hand sanitizers, and then also for the oxygen, also pure, you know. And so many things that actually like can find in the market, like they are like a supply very limited, that our members actually have it. Okay, so we are very proud with our members, a lot of them stepping up during this crisis and then giving each other like a positive like encouragement. We even start a charity, like Charity Indonesia Restaurant, to help the hospitals here, which is the whole member, a lot of member like stepping us as the committee, which is our charity is gonna be gonna be bigger than our chapters, okay? It's like a more of the public wise. So cool. I can say that so far everything has been positive. Thank you.
Yep. And tell me just a quick one, how long does your forum go for and how often are you having them? Virtually, that is, how often?
We are still going as a normal, like about 2, 3. We have 8 people in the forums, okay? Like about, we still have a 3 hours forums, okay? And then it's still normal as usual. We have a presentation which we switch. We still making the forum format. We don't change anything, but the last presentation is only be longer because like each of us are sharing about the strategy, but still time as the forum.
It's very helpful. It's rare we get insight to other people's forums. So I love to ask these questions to help many EOs here. Maybe they can change their forum for a better experience. Well, in the last couple of minutes, I just want to say thank you so much to you guys, Herbert and Lanny, for sharing your stories. They're certainly very unique and obviously not we're all in it together, but for this region, it's really important, obviously, with manufacturing side of things for all of our businesses. I mean, I know in Australia, lots of businesses are struggling down the chain to get stock. So it's a big thing, the manufacturing side. I think we've had up to nearly 50 people on this call. I've had a look, they're all from around the world. So I'm sure there's been lots of great learnings. It's been very active, hasn't it, Kim, with all the questions?
Absolutely, I had trouble keeping up.
That's right. And coming from all corners of the globe, which is really exciting. So, so this is our industry call, our webinar that we've done here in manufacturing. We'll be doing more of these in the future to support our members around the world to learn more about this industry. It's been great insights into it. So to follow up through, this is being recorded for people who weren't able to make it, to be able to download and watch it. The next part is obviously the Maya groups, the industry groups in there for you all to jump onto. And we'll be doing more webinars in different industries to ensure that we keep the learning high and keep the value high from the organization, obviously. Kim, how do I say it again? Thank you so much. You have been sitting on my screen all afternoon, supporting. I've been having lots of fun and enjoying this panel. I've got to say, I've taken home, I think I was up to 38 before. I think I'm up to 46 now. I've just added on nearly 10 more. So thanks, Lanny and Herbert, for your time and your stories. It's really given me value. Kim, how many extra learnings did you get in the last session?
Now, this time I wanted to sit back and just let it all soak in. And I loved how Herbert focused on the relationships part of managing through this crisis. And Lanny was very tactical. So it was really nice to have those two different perspectives today.
Yeah, totally agree. And just one thing I just got reminded was the Slack channel. If you guys are not on the Slack channel, you're missing out. Make sure you jump on that. I'm seeing new users get on that nearly every minute with the 14,000 EOs around the world. They're jumping on it. You're on it, Kim. I think I've seen your name there. You've jumped on that. Herbert and Lanny, make sure you do jump on the Slack channel that's available. We'll be getting the link out of this recording and the other recordings through those channels, obviously. Well, I think that's a wrap, Kim. From here at this studio, Carlo Studio and Kim Studio, this session here, as you can see, is for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And that is all of you here on the screen. And obviously all you guys, we're all in lockdown around the world. So everybody at home. So thanks so much for everything you're doing and in making all of this great. So let's sign off. Thank you. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Kim. Thanks, Lanny.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Signing off.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.